So how have you been surviving, maybe the word's thriving for the last couple of years? This has been quite a ride we as human beings have been on, isn't it? And spiritual beings and as spiritual community too, you know. The theme, I'm really pleased that you guys adapted the theme of home for this morning, because I think in the last couple of years, many of us have gone a little unconscious about our connection to life, to infinite, to God. You know, it's easy to get sucked into the drama of what's going on around us, isn't it? All you have to do is turn on the news and get sucked right in. And the idea that the theme of returning, remembering where home is, or remembering the way home, is a theme that it's a metaphor, obviously, and it's already been spoken to very well this morning. You guys do a great job, you know. I love this symbol. I trust that over the years you've been told what this means, right? Spirit, mind, body, spirit descending through mind into form and then returning back into to spirit at the right time. The whole is God itself. So we're in a process as human beings always returning home through our awareness of our oneness with God. There's only one of us here. It can be no other way. If we really believe, can I get a witness, that God is all there is our fundamental basic premise for this teaching. Yeah? Amen. Okay, so if God is all there is, it's about remembering and coming back to an awareness of that truth. And that's the journey, that's the pleasure and the challenge as well. Spiritually speaking, remembering the way home is the process of returning to the original source of our wholeness, our good, our being. And not that we could ever be separated from the whole. You realize that, right? It's impossible to be separated from God. God is the whole. And yet, at the same time, it's easy for us to become separated in our belief that we are apart from the whole. And what has been taught throughout the years, as you believe, so it is. So we create this experience of duality, this experience of separation. And so really that's the ego mind pulling us, seeking to, encouraging us to acquire or to explore what external power in our life looks like. External power is related to the relative world, to the world of things, people, places, things, titles, bodies, money, homes, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, all of those things, you know, we cause us at some point to feel, if we think that's where our power comes from, it causes us to feel separated from home, from God, okay? And the story of personal integration is what I want to talk to you about. What does integration mean? Integrity. The word integration comes from the word integrity, which comes from the Latin word integer, which means bringing all the parts back together to the whole. You remember, anybody in here ever had an integrated stereo system back in the day? You had your amplifier and your CD and your tape player and blah, blah, all these different things, and the amplifier integrated it all together. Well, that's what we're doing here, is we're bringing all the parts of our lives back into the wholeness of the one. And so that's what returning to home, really, the metaphor means. We're born in wholeness. It can be no other way. We are whole. We are complete. And yet we go, as human beings, we get spiritual amnesia. And in that process, we go unconscious and forget that we're one with the whole. And so the theme of returning home is really realizing that we have become disintegrated from the integrity of oneness. And it's nothing that happens in the world, because we can't be any closer to God than we are in this minute. Can I get a witness for that? It's just that we create an experience of it, we forget about it, and we begin to look to the world for our wholeness, for our sense of completion. And guess what? You'll never find it there. You'll never find it there. So personal integration is really the story of consciously returning home. And probably the best lesson, I love the parables. I'm a fan of the parables. My teacher was a Bible scholar, and so he really was great at giving me the metaphysical interpretation of what the scriptures were about. And probably the most profound story in the entire New Testament about returning home, about coming back to an awareness of our oneness with God, is the prodigal son. The prodigal son is a great story that tells the journey of the human condition when ego-driven pulls us away from the awareness of our oneness with Source, with God. Okay, and you all know the story of the prodigal son, right? But in case you don't, I'm going to review it real quick, and then we're going to go back and kind of look at it from a metaphysical perspective. Prodigal son's a beautiful story. The son there's a man who lived in our farm who had two sons. One was referred to as the prodigal son, the other the stay-at-home son. And one day, the prodigal son comes to his father on the farm and says, "Dad, I want my inheritance. I want to go out and explore the world. It's calling to me. This thing called the far country. I'm interested in knowing more about what's out there. So in order to do that, I need my inheritance. Can you give me my inheritance now so I can go and explore the world? I want to know what's calling me in the further realms of home beyond our home here." So the father, being the unconditionally loving father he was, gave him his inheritance and said, "Here you go. Goodbye." What did the son do? He takes his money and he moves to where? This is audience participation time. He moves to a place called the far country, right? Now, keep in mind, this story is riddled with metaphor, okay? Metaphor. Every one of these things stands for something else, okay? So he goes to the far country, and he ends up squandering all his money away, living in the scripture says he lived in riotous living, which was, meaning that he was living the party lifestyle. He was not conscious about how he was using his funds. So he ended up, a famine fell across the land. There's another metaphor we're going to revisit. Famine fell across the land. And so the son, the prodigal son, loses all of his money, spends it all on poor choices. Can you get a witness for that? Yeah, been there. And he ends up destitute, so destitute that he ends up taking a job on a pig farm, slopping the stalls. Now, for a nice Jewish boy, that's not a good place to be, okay? But he did it because he needed the money. And so he's absolutely poor and destitute. And so one day, he's sitting there, and he got so destitute, he was eating the food of the swine, which is another metaphor, okay? Couldn't get any worse. And so he's sitting there feeling sorry for himself, and he says, "Wait a minute." He came to himself, and he said, "Wait a minute. Even the servants back at my father's farm have it better than this. I think I will rise and return home and ask my dad for forgiveness and see if I can get a job there." So he does. He's walking home, and this is my conjecture of the whole story, right? This is my interpretation, so you can take or leave what works for you. But he is walking towards the home, and the father, working the fields, sees him and turns to him, faces him, another metaphor, right? Opens his arm widely. And he says, "My son, who was dead, has now returned. He's come home." And the father embraces him, loves him, welcomes him unconditionally, turns to his servants and say, Bring the seamless robe and the rings and the best shoes and slay the fatted calf, and we're going to party and celebrate the fact that my son who was dead has come back to life. Oh, wonderful, rich metaphors here, okay, in the parables, idioms and whatnot. So he's in the farm having this party, and his stay-at-home son, who never left home, was out in the fields pulling weeds like a dutiful son should, on the ranch, heard this ruckus going on in the farmhouse. He comes in and he says to the servants, "What's going on here?" And one of the servants says, "Well, your brother who was lost, has come back to life. He's here, and your dad is celebrating that." He gave him the fatted calf and the seamless robe, and all these things are metaphor, right? And rings for his fingers and the best shoes, whatnot. And so they're celebrating the fact that he's here. And what did the stay-at-home son do? He said, "That's not fair." And again, this is my conjecture. I'm reading between the lines of what it says in the parable. But he's saying, "That's not fair. I've been here all the time working like a good, dutiful son. I've been outside pulling the weeds and doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing on the farm. It's not fair. He, my brother, left. You gave him his inheritance, and it's all gone. And now he's back. It's just not fair. You never once, he's talking to his dad. He said, you never once gave me a fatted calf so I could party down with my friends. You never gave me the best shoes and a seamless robe and rings. Why is that? And the father looks at his son, the stay-at-home son, and he turns. I could just imagine him standing on the bluff overlooking the farmlands, and he puts his arm on his son, and he says, son, don't you realize all of this is yours? It's always been yours. Right? There's where the story ends. But that's not the end of the story. Now let's go back and review the metaphor of the story. Keep in mind that every character in the story, as the whole scriptures, is reflective of some aspect of us. We are each have some of the prodigal son living in us. We have some of the stay-at-home son living in us. We have, or daughter. We have the presence of the Father living within us. So symbolically, what do these things mean? Well, the stay-at-home son, obviously, he went to the far country because he was called to experience the world, right? And in the far country, he lost everything, which is not uncommon when you go unconscious and you're busy at the level of consuming and not participating in creating a life worth living. So he lost all of his money, and one day he has this awareness that rises from what he's sitting there eating the pig food. And again, for nice Jewish boys, eating pig food that's a symbol of degradation. What Jesus was telling in this story is this guy couldn't have gotten any farther away from God, from home as he possibly could. Of course, in the story, God is who? The Father, right? The Father. So the stay-at-home or the prodigal son remembers. He rises. It says in the scriptures, I will rise and return home. What does that mean? It means I have a shift in consciousness. I will rise in my awareness of my oneness with the Father, and I'll go back to the source of my good. Right? And when he did, the Father saw him. What did he do? The Father didn't turn his back and say, you should have listened to me, you fool. You lost it all. What did the Father do? Unconditionally opened his arms, embraced him, and said, you're here. You're here. That who I thought was dead is alive. Let's celebrate. Right? So there's the prodigal son, the father, and now the stay-at-home son. The stay-at-home son, what was the deal with the stay-at-home son? Q&A time. He was angry, but before that, what else was he? He was loyal, but what else was he? He was unconscious. He wasn't aware of the good that sat right under his feet the whole time, right? He was not aware of how good he had it. Now, the question is, where in you does the prodigal son live, and where in you does the stay-at-home son live? And where in you does your awareness of your oneness with the Father live? That's the moral of the story, right? That's the moral of the story. The prodigal son is a story of returning back to the source of our good. After we have the far country, the pandemic has done an amazing job of putting on as the far country. The far country is anything that lures us away, woos us away, pulls us away from our awareness of our oneness with God. It's just that simple and that challenging. And so the remembrance of, I and the Father are one. And I love the saying, there's only one of us here, right? There's only one of us here. And I love the song you sing about, looking somebody in the eyes. It's great. There's only one of us here. Always has been, always will be. And so we as humankind are slowly awakening and remembering. What does remember mean? Remember means come back to the whole. We're remembering slowly our oneness with unity with the one. Okay? And when we do that, our lives are enriched. Right? So the prodigal son symbolizes that part of our mind that is egotistically driven and always thinking there is better than here. You know, this other side of the fence is always greener. Ain't so. But the ego mind convinces us that there's always something missing where we are. Always something missing where we are, and something better beyond. It's called the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is that thing we get on. The ego drives us to acquire something, and once we acquire that thing, we think it's going to, we've got it, we're good, we're happy. And what happens? Shortly after that, then the next thing comes up. You throw the thing that you were acquiring on the side. You move to the next thing to acquire. And by the way, this whole story is accounted for in my book, Your Redefining Moments, Becoming Who You're Born to Be. And the book is about guiding you back to who you were the moment you were born, before the world got a hold of you and started putting labels on you and convincing you were something other than the divine being that you are. That's what the book is about. And the prodigal son is a metaphor, a story about our forgetfulness. And when we allow the human mind, which is ego-driven, to pull us away from the awareness of our oneness with God. And I tell you what, over the last 2 years, man, I got to plead guilty. You know, staying at home for 2 years and not having I did some work on most of my work, my mentoring and public speaking was on Zoom. And it ain't the same. There's nothing better than being sharing true sacred community with somebody when you can look in their eyes and have immediate response, you know. So the pandemic has been for many of us the far country. The far country is anything that pulls our attention away from the awareness of our oneness with the divine. Far country could be a physical condition that we end up focused on so much. I had a bicycle accident in January. I tore both of my rotator cuffs. Fall down, broke the fall, blah, blah, blah. I'm only telling you this because that was far country for me, because that pain has been and still is so overwhelming at times that I forget about the other part of me that doesn't have anything to do with the pain. Identified with the body, not the soul, not the spirit. Okay? And so I'm finding my time. I'm finding myself more and more focused on trying to get back to that place of oneness where I don't know. I know that I'm not defined by my shoulders. I'm not defined by where my body is sitting. I'm defined by something much greater than that. But what does that require, my friends? What does it require? It requires mindfulness. It requires being willing to be conscious and present in the moment, because the present moment is what tethers us to our oneness with God. Take a deep breath. There it is. So somewhere in my notes I scribbled down 4 points. See if I can find it. Coming home may require 4 points, okay? And I think these are valid. The first one is awakening to the fact that you're in the far country. How many of us are in the far country, but we stay so numb? Felt like a Baptist right then. we stay so numb that we're not aware that we're in the far country. It becomes normal to us. The pain, the suffering, the sense of unhappiness becomes the norm for us, and we don't realize that even the servants back at the home had it better than that, right? So we have to remember in the present moment. That's why mindfulness is such a valid practice. Remembering to remember to come back to the one. Okay. The second one is forgiveness. Forgive yourself for having gone to the far country. It's real easy to beat ourselves up once we get there, isn't it? We're experiencing the conditions that we've created. And all of those are mistakes. What is a mistake? A mistake is forgetting the truth about who we are and reconciling, coming back. The third is humility and a willingness to grow. If you're in the far country, there's something more you need to know. If you go unconscious and you forget, there's something you need to know. And humility and willingness to grow. Have you read Joseph Campbell's book regarding the what the hell was it? The Journey's Hero. Journey's Hero. We leave on a quest, and we can't come back to the castle until we have changed, until we've accomplished the mission and changed. That's what we're talking about here. Humility and a willingness to grow and know there's more for us to know. And when you're in the far country, start asking wisdom self, what is it I need to know in this moment about this condition? What brought me here? I'm teachable. Show me the way. Not show me the way out, but show me the way in. Right? And the fourth one is spiritual integrity. Spiritual integrity. Live to be integrated spiritually. Spirit, mind, and body, wherever you go. There's no less God in a hospital ward than there is a church sanctuary. It's about remembering to remember to remember. Easy to do? No. Possible? Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So what else do I got here? That blah, 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 blah. I guess that's pretty much the story of the prodigal son. And I would ask you when you leave here today, ask yourself, where in me does the prodigal son live? That place in me that is uneasy and wants to know, wants to go out and sometimes it's avoidance. It's about doing anything to cause us to not pay attention to what is in front of us, right? What part of you is the stay-at-home son that you've got it so good that you've gone numb to it? You've forgotten how blessed you are. How blessed you are. And I don't care what's in front of you, the fact that are you alive? Yeah. You're blessed. To bless anyone or anything is to remember the presence of God in that which we bless. So bless yourself. When you look in the mirror in the morning, bless yourself. Bless your car. Bless your spiritual community. Bless your boss. Bless your paycheck. Bless whatever it is that is in your life that is allowing you to continue to thrive. Okay. Of course, the Father in the story lives within each of you, and you know that. You know that. I know that. It's remembering it. That's the practice. Remember, remember, remember. In one of my books, the Art of Being is about finding your purpose in every splendid moment that you're alive. And at the end of each chapter, there are mindfulness practices that help you remember how to put those ideas into your mind and into practice in that moment. God is, I am. Say that with me. God is, I am. Now breathe in and say God is and hold it. God is. And breathe out, I am. If you can make that a practice that you practice throughout the day, especially when you find yourself in the far country, it will help bring you back. It will help bring you back. One day at a time, one moment at a time. That's the wisdom of the prodigal son. That's the wisdom of remembering the way home. Come back home to your oneness with God, and your life will be made whole, irrespective of what you think it looks like or doesn't look like. Take a nice deep breath.